Hello,
Okay.
everyone. This is Lori Watkin from TheraPlay with you tonight. We want to thank you all so very much for attending this webinar. We're very pleased to have Sandy Wild Sutton presenting tonight. Sandy has started her occupational therapy career in 1987, working in neurorehabilitation with adults, where she specialized in traumatic brain injury rehabilitation. She consulted in pediatrics shortly after, working simultaneously in brain injury while consulting in pediatrics. Sandy was neurodevelopmental treatment NDT certified in 1989 and gained her therapeutic listening certification in 2010. Sandy's desire to understand the neurophysiological basis of sensory processing disorders, vision, and executive functioning have led her on a path toward furthering her education in these areas. She's worked in rehabilitation, acute care, early intervention, home, school, and outpatient clinic-based treatment settings. Sandy is currently the Senior Educational Coordinator for the TheraPlay family of companies. She also serves as a mentor and treating occupational therapist. Throughout her career, Sandy has lectured at state and national levels to a number of audiences, including colleagues, teachers, and parents on development, autism, concussion, executive functioning, orthopedics, sensory processing, vision, and feeding. We're very excited to have Sandy present to you tonight the Development 101 Milestones and Red Flags for Preschoolers. Sandy, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Great. So welcome everybody. And I hope everybody's feeling well this evening. You may hear a cough from me. I'm absolutely fine, just a little allergies that are hanging on. So I've got my water here ready to go. And hopefully everybody's going to enjoy the presentation. If you have any questions, I believe you can type them in. Is that correct, Lori?
Lauren, I'm going to defer that to you.
I'm sorry, Sandy, can you repeat that?
If they have questions, can they type them in to us?
Absolutely.
Okay, and so I believe then I will be able to see them and answer any questions that you have. So let's get going with Development 101, Milestones and Red Flags for Preschoolers. Whoop, something just happened here. So I'm going to just say we need to, my personal skills for the computer are the weakest out of the three of us on this webinar. So I'm going to do my very best to make sure that, there we go, nope.
Go to view, Sandy.
Okay, yep, I'm looking. All right, just trying to get there. All right, now, click forward. There we go. All right. So I do need to give you a few disclosures. The relevant financial relationship, I am an employee of TheraPlay, and I will reference our place of employment and case studies from some of the children that we work with. I won't be giving you any names because I need to adhere to the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which is HIPAA regulations within this presentation. I have no relevant non-financial relationships to disclose to all of you. So today, I'm hoping that all our participants will be able to demonstrate knowledge of key milestones for both gross motor, fine motor, language, feeding, and social emotional developmental skills that are going to be important to the children you see in your preschool classrooms. We want to try to identify some red flags that you might see with children between 18 months and 5 years old. We're going to identify play activities that are going to help you in your classrooms to promote those developmental skills. We want to be able to explain how you can approach families more effectively when you do have a concern about a child's development, and how to support you in that process. And we want to be able to describe to you all the different supports that are available, not only at TheraPlay, but also IU services that may be available to you in your individual state. Today, we're going to review the developmental red flags from kids from 18 months to 5 years, and look at those red flags from a perspective of what might physical therapy help, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and then if children need feeding assessments, both occupational therapy and speech therapy, work with children who have feeding issues, and you might be on the front lines of looking at kids who might be having some of those difficulties as well. We're going to talk about suggestions for play activities to promote those developmental skills, for gross motor skills, fine motor skills, and speech and language skills. And then again, we're going to look at approaching families when you have concern about a child, and assessing services, both developmentally based services, educationally based services, and medically based services. And we're going to talk about what the differences are between those services. So let's get going. First, we're going to talk about physical therapy. Physical therapy works on many of those gross motor skills. And a lot of times when people ask what's the difference between occupational therapy and physical therapy, you're going to find in all three disciplines that there is a crossover of skills. And so sometimes we talk about physical therapy being the therapy that helps you figure out how to get there, and occupational therapy is the therapy that's going to work on the skills once you get there. And so when we look at 18 to 24 months, the skills that get us there are walking, and some of the red flags that you may see are kids that are up on their tippy toes, and primarily they're up on those tippy toes all the time. That's called toe walking. And initially, it could be as a result of sensory seeking behavior, or to avoid sensory information. So they don't want to put their feet down on the ground because maybe they don't like the feeling of the floor or the grass or stones underneath them. And then what frequently happens is they may have some tightening in their muscles and their ankles. And so they end up having more difficulty than they originally started with. The other thing that we want you guys to look at is things like W sitting. So that little girl who has the block in her hand, she is actually in a long sit where one leg is in that half W and the other leg is outstretched. That position is actually an okay position for kids to be in. But the problem is when both of those legs go backwards and we get that W sit, that's really not good for children. And one of the things that you see that happens is when kids are in that W sit position, it shifts their hips backwards, and now their little spine when they're sitting is rounded, and they don't develop that core strength that they need to develop for other things that they need to do. The other kids that are that you see, the problems that you see at this age are a child who does a lot of tripping and falling. They walk a few steps, they fall down. They walk a few steps, they fall down. Or they're the kids who run, 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 fall, run, 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 fall. There doesn't seem to be any control with their movements. If they're able to have difficulty walking up and down steps, that can be a problem. And if you see at this age, 18 to 24 months, where they're not able to run, that can also be a problem. So the first thing we're going to do here is just take a little bit, look at a video. This is a little girl who is 2 years old, and she is a toe walker. And the physical therapist is working on activities that are going to force her to put her feet down. So you see right up here, those heels are right up off the floor. That's what you see with the toe walker. And our goal is to get those heels down. Okay, so that's an example of a therapy session where you see a toe walker and some things that we're going to do to get those heels back down. For occupational therapy for 18 to 24 months, so I had talked about occupational therapy is the therapy that's going to work on those skills once kids get there. So those are all the things like block play, imaginative play, things that are going to expand those play experiences. And so areas that are problematic for an 18 to 24-month-old child is a child who seems to need that intensity. They're crashing into things. Maybe they come to you as a teacher to come give you a big hug, and what they need to do is crash into you before you give that hug. Maybe you'll see that they need to intensely hug their peers. Or they hug so hard that they knock their peers down. They have difficulty participating in short quiet time activities or circle time. 6 to 7 minutes at this point, they should be able to sit. They can't imitate play schemes. So our first beginning play schemes are those play schemes that are very imitation in nature. I watch my mommy feed the baby, I'm going to imitate that, I'm going to feed the baby. I watch my mommy cook dinner, I'm going to pretend to cook dinner myself. So children at 18 to 24 months should be able to start to do this kind of imaginative play. And if you don't see that imaginative play, that again is a red flag. The other thing that you want to see is that can be problematic are those kids who are really distracted by visual and auditory information. So let's say if you're in a nursery school in a church, and I know the church that I go to has a nursery school in the basement, and if the grass was being cut that day, the child would be totally distracted by the grass, or another teacher walks by in the classroom and they're distracted by that information. So they're constantly being drawn by the auditory information that has nothing to do with what's going on in your classroom. Or if visually they get distracted, they're constantly looking at all the other things in the classroom that are hung up in the classroom, and they can't visually attend on you, the teacher. That can be a red flag that we are starting to think, okay, is there a problem here that is impacting the child from developing skills that they need to develop? And then by 2 years old, kids are going to start their scissor skills. And are they starting to not want to participate in those things? They do not like getting their hands full of glue or other problems. Those are other areas that could be a red flag. For speech and language, for the 18 to 24-month-old, we're looking that 25 to 50% of their language should be intelligible. So at this age, we don't expect that everything that they say is something that you can understand, but at least 25 to 50%, or at least that number above 20 to 50% should be intelligible. Maybe they're not combining nouns and adjectives. So the blue car, the pink bunny, those adjectives should start to be combined by 18 to 24 months. They should be able to ask and answer questions. If they're inattentive to a story, that can also be a problem. And if they can't identify an object, that can also be a cause for concern. Feeding 18 to 24 months, if they cannot manage most different textures. So if you see that a child's always coming in with like a yogurt or an applesauce, and if you share snacks within the class, I don't know how many preschools actually are allowed to do that anymore, and they're shying away from different kinds of textures. That can be a problem because kids by 18, 24 months should be able to eat hard, crunchy, soft, a mixed texture, and be able to manage that. If kids are not drinking from an open cup, that's also problematic at this age. We should be able to see that kids should not only be able to hold the cup, but they should be able to manage drinking out of that cup without spillage. So here we're going to look at a 2-year-old boy with developmental feeding and language, gross motor and fine motor delays. And our speech therapist is working on feeding in the speech session.
Yay! Should we do more? Oh, are you ready? How big's Dean? So big.
Okay, so she's doing some oral motor stimulation.
Here it comes.
That's what she's doing every time she touches.
1, 2, and kiss. 1, 2. 2 kisses and boom. Yay!
And he's also working on desensitization to foods. So the foods to him are giving him more of a noxious feeling versus a good feeling.
Go see. Ants go marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching one by one, the little one stops to stare at the sun, and they all go marching down to the ground to get out of the rain. Boom, 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 boom.
So we're going to add a little texture in there, and the ability to just handle those messy hands and that messy face is super important to be able to actually get food in our mouth.
The ants go marching 5 by 5, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching 5 by 5. The little one stops to find a beehive, and they all go marching down to the ground to get out of the rain. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah.
So initially what you might see with a child like this is they don't like to get their hands messy. They don't like to dip their hands in any kind of paint, or they might want to wash their hands right away. Excuse me, they may not want to do any kind of tactile play in your classroom. But then you see with this little guy, especially, he also didn't want to put a spoon near his mouth. So feeding becomes a difficult situation for that family and for that little guy. All right, so let's move on to 2 to 5 years old. More of your classrooms probably have kids in this age range. So if you see that kids are overly cautious with more physical activities, if they have difficulty transitioning from the floor to standing without using their hands, if they require a railing to walk up and down the steps, or they're unable to use those alternating feet, one, then the other, to go up the stairs and then back down the stairs. If they're unable to jump down from a height of 24 to 26 inches, so that would probably be, a curb. They should be able to jump from the curb down to the street. And by 5 years old, a child should be able to skip, gallop, hop on one leg, stand on one leg for 10 seconds, and start to think about doing jumping jacks. So that's important. So right here, we're going to look at a little boy with delayed milestones, and he has something called low tone. So let me just explain that term of low tone. We all come, our muscles are have a level of texture, and we call that tone. High tone is when you see a great deal of muscle definition, and low tone is when you're very soft, almost like a jelly feeling. If you've ever seen an older adult who has a stroke, somebody who holds their arm up and close to their body usually has low tone, and the arm that's hanging down, that was high tone, and the arm that's hanging down is low tone. But we see with kids that there is this range of tone that we see, and children with low tone tend to sit in that W sitting posture. They tend to sit more rounded. They maybe have their neck extended frustrated while they're sitting. And so that low tone actually makes it harder for them to recruit the strength that they need in order to participate in growth and fine motor skills. So let's take a look at this little guy.
Good job. Good job, Finn. That's hard. Come on over. Good job, Finley.
So this is super hard for him. Okay, and then here is the next one.
Good job. Push on the wall. Oh, try. Push, 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 push. Push. There's another birdie. Ooh, it's a purple one. Push. Good job, bud. Uh-oh, try again. Here we go. Wait, one more, then we're all done. Can we clean them up?
Okay, so that gives you an idea of, you'll see that their skills are super hard for them.
Oh, no, Joel, that doesn't mean get out another bucket. Good job. Oh, you almost got it. You got another. Good job. There's more.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of some of the things that we work on. And a lot of times with children with low tone, we're working on a lot of things that are strength-based because that low tone is impacting their ability to have that core strength. And that core, we're talking about our trunk and pelvis as our core. And that gives us the stability for mobility. So if that core is not stable, then we can't have the mobility that we would like for tabletop activities, for walking, all those things that we know our 2 to 5 year olds need to do within their play. So some of the red flags that we see in the kids who are 2 to 5 is if you're seeing a lot of frustration within tabletop tasks. Either they're shutting down in the sense that they refuse to participate. And so many times that frustration looks like shutdown, and they just won't even participate. They say no, or maybe they try to get up, and maybe they're having behaviors because they're actually frustrated with the task at hand. And you may see a difference between what they self-initiate. So if they decide they'd like to come over and cut, that's very different than if you ask them to sit down and cut. And so sometimes kids, those red flags are actually not that they can't do the skill, but they can't do it on demand. And so that's important. We want to look at how kids are holding their tools, so their crayons, their scissors, markers, pencils. Is it awkward? Does it by 2 to 5 years, we should start to see that as they pick up their pencils and pens, that it's starting to be closer to what we call a tripod grasp. If they're still grasping those utensils, like pencils, pens, crayons, with their whole fist, that is a concern. If they are unresponsive to social cues, both verbal and nonverbal, that is a problem. If they're struggling with daily tasks that they should, you see that the other kids are not having any problems with. If they have a lot of over and under reacting. So overreacting is you you ask the class to go transition to circle time and they fall on the floor and melt down and cry, or they don't even react at all. You've just asked the class to go to circle time and they're still sitting playing in center time. They haven't even noticed the rest of the class is already where you need everybody to be. And the other thing is if you see a difference in their skill level from one side of the body to the opposing side, if they're not showing hand dominance, if they're constantly still, sometimes I use my left hand, sometimes I use my right hand. We should start to see by 2 to 5 years old that kids are starting to develop that hand dominance. And so that's very important to see. So now we're going to look at a 3-year-old boy with delayed milestones who's receiving occupational therapy. He's rolling on his tummy over a peanut ball and collecting puzzles from a sensory bin. And he's receiving what we call calming proprioceptive input. So proprioceptive input is the input that we get from our muscles and joints. So when we look at our sensory systems, there are a few systems that are very organizing for our children. And the proprioceptive system is one, the information that we get from our muscles and joints. And the way we can give that to children is by pushing, pulling, lifting, anything that's going to really make them, do some heavy work is also how that is coined. And then the other sensory system that's super important and very helpful in calming can be the tactile system. And so you'll see that we have a lot of kids, especially those kids who are very difficult to engage. We use the proprioceptive and the tactile systems first, and together they're called the somatosensory system. And that somatosensory system is really important in early development and helping a child calm and organize themselves. And so that's why this session is set up with those kinds of activities. So when we talk about heavy work, he's getting it because he's getting lots of information from the peanut ball. He's getting a lot of information just in being on his belly over his arms. And he's getting the tactile information from the rice bin. And now he's pushing himself back, so he's really getting that heavy work. So those kids who are like a bull in a china shop, a lot of times you think of our little boys, but more and more we're seeing a lot of little girls who are having these same kinds of issues. They're looking for that proprioceptive input. Their systems are what we call underreactive. And so they're looking for more of that input. And as kids do less and less time outside, they're not getting as much of that proprioceptive system or the proprioceptive input that kids of yesteryear got automatically. So our speech and language red flags, we're going to chop this up a little bit because the speech develops so quickly in this time frame, and we really need to look at catching some of those concerns right away, because that's going to help kids be more intelligible. And we know that language is so important for reading and writing that we want to make sure that these skills are developing at the pace that they should. So by 2 to 3 years old, if they have less than 50 to 75% of their language that's intelligible, and that really means that maybe mommy and daddy can understand everything they say, but if you're having trouble or another adult who walks into your classroom is having trouble, because I think one of the things that parents will say is, well, I can understand everything they say. Well, that's good, except everybody around them needs to be able to understand what they say as well in order for them to develop skills. If they're having difficulty with 2 to 4 word phrases, if they're having difficulties with concepts of one, if they lack the ability to match similar things, get the 2 blue triangles. If they can't say, I'm 2, or I'm 3, or I'm 4. And then the other thing to go with that, if they can't show you that number on their hand, that is a an occupational therapy concern. So them being able to know their age is super important, and then being able to show you how many fingers they are is also super important. If they're, again, not engaging in that pretend play needs to advance. So not only at 2 and 3 are they starting to, play baby and kitchen, but you might start to see by 3-year-olds that they want to dress up and they want to be police officer. So that play needs to emerge. And if they can't answer where questions, where did you go this morning before class? Where is the teddy bear? Where did you put that block? They should be able to answer those kinds of questions. By 3 to 4-year-old, now we expect 80% of their speech to be intelligible. If kids are not expressing emotions, or again, emotions are extreme, that's something that we should be concerned about. There are many kids now who, and they don't just have to be kids who are on the autism spectrum. We're finding kids with ADHD are just not understanding more than happy and sad. If they can't understand that somebody's mad at them, then they can't develop the appropriate reactions to that. They should, if they're not using regular plurals, if they're avoiding using complex sentences, these are all problems that are red flags for a 3 to 4-year-old. By 4 to 5-year-olds, children should be able to count to 10. They should have adult-like grammar. So if you're not seeing those things, that is a red flag. They should be able to retell their day. So if they're not able to tell their parent what went on in nursery school, that is a concern. They should be able to identify basic shapes. If they're not using 4 and 8-word sentences now, that is problematic. And if their speech is unintelligible to strangers, again, at 4 to 5, this is really starting to be more of a problem. And unintelligible speech, especially, is going to lead to problems for reading and writing down the road, and sounding out words, or may do that. So we want to make sure that we get it taken care of. So just so you know where kids are going from 5 to 7 years old, they should, if they're unable to develop new gross motor skills, if they're having trouble keeping up with their peers, if their lack of awareness of their surrounding environment is problematic to them, if you see that they're having difficulty in what we call motor planning or coordination, and that you'll see maybe kids will pause and they'll look around the room and try to figure out how other kids are doing something, and then they're going to try it and maybe it won't be successful, and they'll try again, and you maybe need to show them a second time. That's what we talk about when we're talking about motor planning and coordination. If they have difficulty throwing and catching a small ball, this is also problematic for 5 to 7-year-olds old. So let's look at a child, a 5-year-old boy with delayed milestones, and this physical therapist is working on using what we call mature alternating patterns on the stairs. So when I talk about that alternating pattern, one foot, then the other foot goes up and down those stairs.
Tom, one down, hands on belly. Big boy steps. Where's this one go? See, this one. I see this one.
So you saw as he was coming down those steps, initially he wanted to go left foot, then right, left foot, then right, left foot, then right, instead of that alternating that you saw on those last 2 steps. So it's important by 5 years old that kids are starting to do those alternative steps. All right, so this is a 5-year-old girl who has in-toeing. She's working on balance as her in-toeing causes her to fall frequently, and the therapist is cueing her to keep her toes straight during most of her activities. These kids also may need more what we call, again, that proprioceptive input to know where their body is in space. Go ahead.
Now how many?
Okay, so that obstacle course was pretty cool in that that child got a lot of different feedback, not only from that proprioceptive input of information to our muscles and joints, but she also got some input from what we call our vestibular system. Our vestibular system is located in our inner ear. And again, it gives us a lot of information about where we are in space and our balance, but we're starting to see that the vestibular system is not only important for balance and developmental skill, but we're starting to see some relationship and correlation with kids who have weaker vestibular systems with impaired reading and writing. And so we want to make sure that I think I went ahead here. So we want to make sure that we develop that vestibular system and give kids not only that proprioceptive input, but also vestibular input. And so that's why you saw all those different kinds of uneven surfaces and lots of different kinds of surfaces so that they could get that input. All right, this is a 6-year-old girl, and we're working on correcting her W sitting. So there's that W sit.
Isabella, can you fix your legs, please? Sit crisscross. Thank you, ma'am.
So look at how different she sits after she fixes her legs. I'm going to play that one more time. So the first time when she was W sitting, you saw her hips were shifted back and her spine was rounded, which puts our neck in a forward extended position, which actually changes the ability for our eyes to visually attend more appropriately. So I'm going to play it again so you can see the difference in her positioning. There she is, rounded spine.
Isabella, can you fix your legs, please? Sit crisscross. Thank you, ma'am.
And there you go. All right. So this is the position that we really want to see kids in. It's super important for many different components of development. So this is a 6-year-old boy with muscle weakness. And we talked about that low tone, but probably additional muscle weakness in addition to low tone. And they're working on what we call upper extremity core strengthening activities. So upper extremity is arms, core is that trunk. So we want to get that trunk nice and strong so that we can have improved mobility in our shoulders, elbows, and wrists. And he's receiving both physical therapy and occupational therapy to work on motor coordination, body awareness, and balance.
Let's do 2 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here we go. Yay, Jacob.
Okay, so that core strength is super important. And what you just saw him is in prone extension. That's what that position is called, with that Superman, arms out, legs out. It's super important. Again, that prone extension position and having that strength for that helps us develop skills that we need for our vision that we're going to use down the road for reading and writing. Okay, so this 6-year-old boy, I think this is, this one he's working on increasing that core or that trunk strength along with hip strength for improved balance and gross motor skills for jumping and running.
Good. Oh, much better. Control, bud. Next. This time again. This time we're going to get all the way to our feet on this one. Go up. Oh, you don't need more on me,
Okay, So you probably say, okay, this is something that we've created inside the gym, but if you see that kids are having trouble on the playground with some of these climbing skills, that again is an area where you may say, all the other kids are having no difficulty going up and down these slides, going up and down the rock walls, but this child is having difficulty. That's another area where you say, okay, this just doesn't seem, the pieces aren't adding up, and maybe I have some concerns for what's going on. So occupational therapy red flags for 5 to 7 years old. You're going to see that kids aren't applying appropriate pressure to the crayon and the pencil, and they may be making either really light strokes or they're coloring so hard that they're ripping the paper, or they color over and over in one area. They have limited ability to stay within the lines in color by numbers or any kind of coloring, and then keeping their words between the lines when they're writing. They're struggling with completing written work. They may be standing up frequently when they're at the table and need to move. You may see rubbing and blinking of the eyes. They may be making excuses to avoid tasks at hand because it's difficult. May see some overreactions to transitions. So some of your kids who have those August, September, October birthdays, these are kids that you're thinking, okay, they should be ahead of everybody else in the classroom. They should have some of these skills. So if you're seeing some of these skills, what's great is they've got that gift of time because their birthday is in September, but you also want to think about where they should be. And that they should have some of these skills. They should be able to transition easily and not overreact to those transitions. If they're not responding to social cues, if they're actively seeking out others to bump into and to do more inappropriate activities, that's concerning. And if they need help organizing their workspace, so this is the child, you're doing the craft, let's say you're making you're making a hat for St. Patrick's Day, and everybody needs to cut out a square and cut out a rectangle, and they've also been given a clover sticker to put onto their work. This is the child that the sticker falls on the floor. They throw away the square with their extra paper. They can't figure out where all their materials are. That is organizing the workspace, and that can be problematic for a lot of kids. Speech and language, 5 to 6 years old. They can't ask and answer how questions. They're confusing names for the days of the week. They can't count to 30 by rote. They have difficulty with instructions in a group setting. They're not using pronouns, and they do not use past and future tenses. So that is also speech and language red flags for 6 and 7 years old. They may be confused with left and right. They may not be able to engage in conversation. These are concerns. They have difficulty counting to 100 by ones, by tens. They have inappropriate use of passive voice. All those things can be concerning. So let's look at play suggestions that are important to help develop some of these skills, and that would be great if you guys can incorporate these into your preschool settings. So before I talked about heavy work and how important that proprioceptive system is to kids learning and building skills, not only so that they can build strength, core strength, so they have greater mobility, but so that they can get organized from a sensory standpoint, because this proprioceptive play is just so important for improving focus and attention. So heavy work play, anytime you can set up your classroom where they have to push a crate. So if, let's say that you have centers, and one of the centers is Lego time, if you had the big Duplo box inside a crate where they have to maybe pull it out of a shelf and push it across the floor or lift it across the floor, that is a great way for kids to get proprioceptive input. If you have library time and people are returning their library books, maybe one of the kids is the person who has a wagon that they're pulling the books from your classroom to the library. That's another heavy work activity. Anytime that you can give heavy work within your classroom, maybe before recess, everybody puts their chair up on their desk. Then after recess, they all take it down off the desk. That's another heavy work activity. If you have blackboards in your room, cleaning off the blackboards or Windexing windows, they're all heavy work activities. A lot of cleaning type activities are actually heavy work. And I know when I'm stressed out, that's what I do to kind of get myself more organized is I'll scrub a floor or I'll get my space nice and organized, because that heavy work that I'm doing while I clean really helps to organize me and maintain focus. Anytime you can organize obstacle courses where kids are climbing, walking on lines, jumping up and down, that helps them motor plan and sequence and understand directions. A lot of times in therapy gym, we do obstacle courses where they have to go under a tunnel and over the bridge. And so they're learning those concepts of over and under with their whole body. They're learning top and bottom and next to and around. So obstacle courses are great for kids to learn those concepts. And those are important concepts when we start to think about letters, top, bottom, middle. So that they understand those concepts when we're starting to, I don't know if you use Handwriting Without Tears, but that's a great curriculum to transition skills that you learn in an obstacle course to skills to building letters. Any kind of ball games where they have to catch, throw, bounce, kick, that helps to develop those hand-eye coordination skills. Animal walks and wheelbarrow walks help to build upper body strength. Certainly you could do something where everybody has to be a dog and walk from their table over to the carpet for circle time. That's just a different way to do that transition, but it also gives them some proprioceptive input. When I worked in the school system, I worked with fabulous first grade teachers, and it was an older school, and so they had a door to the playground right outside their classroom. And we had a lot of kids that year who were on the autism spectrum or had ADHD, really a lot of focus issues. And so I had talked the teachers of transitioning, talked them into each time they needed to transition from the desk to the carpet, that the kids would line up, do 5 laps around the macadam, and then sit back down. And in the beginning, they thought, we really don't have the time for this. This is going to be just too much. But by January, one of the teachers said to me, you know, the transitions are actually faster. Even when kids have to zip up their coats, put on their hats and mittens, and then take it all off, we find that kids are moving faster from their desks to the carpets, getting all that stuff on, running around the macadam 5 times, and coming back in and taking it all off than if the transition happened without getting that input. And so you want to think about, how can I give kids input throughout the day? I had another first grade teacher who was working on letter recognition, and that was back when the song Who Let the Dogs Out was popular. And she, you know, the kids would be in a big circle around the room, and then who let the A out, and all the kids would be walking around the room and stomping their feet as they were singing the song and learning their letters. Again, so that was a unique way that that teacher transitioned and used proprioceptive feedback in her classroom so that kids, when they sat back down, were more focused and organized and ready to learn. Great things to use when you give them playground time are riding tricycles, scooters for coordination. Again, that gives them proprioceptive input. That gives them what we call that vestibular input, the input that we get moving through space that is located in our inner ear, that can also be very organizing. Anytime that you can work on jumping forward, backward, sideways, up, down. Again, they're getting all that input, but they're also developing those gross motor suggestions, gross motor skills within their play. And then anytime that they can move through space, gymnastic type play, including rolling, log rolling, and somersault, where they're rolling in a forward roll, they are great skills, again, to build the vision skills that we need for reading and writing. Believe it or not, those are two. I was actually just looking at a course myself today, and the therapist was talking about kids who have difficulty with developing visual skills that they need for reading and writing. And she talked about one of the things that she does in therapy a lot for these kids is working on forward rolls and log rolling. And as they're log rolling, looking for a visual target so that they are developing that skill of visual attention. And so it doesn't always seem like these things are linked, but we're finding more and more as we study neurology and what's going on in the brain that everything is linked. So fine motor play suggestions, use of spray bottles, that helps develop hand strength and what we call the palmar arch. A lot of kids, when they have weak hands, you'll see that they haven't really developed. When you make a fist with your hand, you should have knuckles there. And you see with kids with very low tone and poor hand strength that they haven't really developed those knuckles. They have the baby indents still, and so that tells me that they may have weak hands and that they're not developing the arches of their hand the way they need to in order to build skills for writing. Anytime you could do something with clothespins, that is a great skill to work on what we call that tripod grasp that we need for pencil and crayons. Ripping paper, crinkling paper, crumpling it up, again, helps build in-hand manipulation skills. It builds finger strengthening, pincer grasp. So doing crafts where they have to rip up the paper and glue it on, or where they have to crinkle paper or crumbling it up. A lot of times I'll rip up old paper and we'll have a snowball fight. And so I've worked on hand strengthening, but then I'm also, doing a really fun activity to get some movement. Removing tape and stickers from their body parts. A lot of times I'll put things on their hands to help them know their left from their right, or the hand that I want them to use, especially if I'm doing a task where they're required to do one thing with one hand and something else with the other, so they have more awareness of what their hands are doing. Placing objects, especially those small ones like pennies, chips, Cheerios, in small containers. So they have to open up those containers. They have to use smaller pincer grasps in order to obtain. So they have to hold the container with one hand while they get the lid open with the other, then dump it over. That's all working on forearm strength and wrist strength. And believe it or not, all those skills are needed not only for writing, but things like tying our shoes, buttoning our shirt, and even things like the forward rolls that I was talking about. When you put on a button shirt, you need to tuck your chin and look down at what you're doing and have that sustained gaze. So being able to do a forward roll actually prepares you for doing something like buttoning your shirt. So it's really important. These skills can be fun and build lots of play activities in, but building skills that we want to see. And I know as preschool teachers, your jobs are getting harder and harder because the curriculum keeps getting pushed down. And so even what kids were doing in kindergarten 5 years ago is very different than what they're doing today. I've heard so many teachers say kindergarten's the new first grade, which means preschool is the new kindergarten. And so you're asking kids to do things that may not be developmentally appropriate at all times. And so they may struggle. So having lots of these play activities to build skills is just as important as the skills themselves. Things like Play-Doh, rolling it out, cutting, making cookies, using all kinds of different cookie cutters, pizza cutters are a great way to build hand strength, hand manipulation, all those skills that we need. Following cars along a path helps build visual motor control. Stenciling, color by numbers, understanding those visual boundaries to develop visual motor control. I love the use of tongs, and if you have kids yourselves and ever go to P.F. Chang's, they have great tongs that they give out to kids instead of chopsticks, and they are absolutely fabulous to pick up things and to build skills again for writing. And again, think about using varied size of writing tools to build kids' skills. So you want to use thick pencils, thick crayons, thick markers, thin pencils. So you want to constantly be using a variety of tools, not only because it changes how they grasp the pencil, but it also changes the drag that they have on the paper, and it builds skills. Again, they're getting that proprioceptive input into the pencil and the crayon from the paper. I also encourage teachers to use different kinds of paper. So sometimes you write on just copy paper. Sometimes you write on construction paper. Sometimes you try to write on tissue paper. Sometimes you put sandpaper underneath to see what that does for you. But utilizing a whole bunch of different kinds of surfaces as well as a variety of tools helps children to build skills. So language play suggestions. So some of the best language play are those gestural songs like Wheels on the Bus, Itsy Bitsy Spider, Open Shut Them. Not only are they great for kids to understand, they're getting lots of input about what the language is supposed to be happening, because now there's a visual of what should be happening, an auditory feedback loop of what should be happening, but now they're also building those fine motor skills that they need within the hand. So those gestural songs are super important to build not only fine motor skills, but also to build language skills. Picture books are really important. Understanding what's going on in the picture helps to develop vocabulary, conversation, turn taking. It builds literacy skills. It starts to build visual skills for kids to understand visualization, which is super important for kids who are working on reading comprehension down the road. So for a child to be able to look at a picture book and say, what's happening in that picture is a great skill for down the road for reading and for developing that conversation skills. Puzzles are also a great way to develop language and play skills. They also develop those visual perceptual skills needed for reading and writing. There's no research study out there, but I really feel that when kids can do a 24-piece interlocking puzzle, they can also write their letters. So having puzzles in your classroom that are really interesting for kids is a great way to start to build those skills. Make-believe and dress-up are important play activities to help build language, not only when kids are talking to each other, because sometimes they're their best teachers is a peer or a sibling, but also for you to join in that make-believe play and dress up whenever you can. There are many kids who need play modeled for them. And so in therapy, many times that's what we're doing is, I'll get the garage out and maybe they're lining up the cars, but I'm taking my car up the elevator and down the ramp, and then I'm filling it with gas, and then I'm stopping, and maybe they're getting into a traffic jam, but I'm trying to build that play scheme, and maybe all they're doing is playing next to me at first, but then they're going to join in, and maybe what's catching their interest is the elevator, and maybe now they're taking the car up and down the elevator, and maybe I'll take their car and I'll say, oh, my turn, and now I'm starting to develop skills to share. So that's super important to build language and to build play schemes, and then just things that are simple listening and imitation games. Simon Says, Follow the Leader. We also see kids today, a lot of kids are very impulsive, so games like Red Light, Green Light teaches them to stop and wait. So many kids today who have iPads. You know, every kid has their own iPad. Nobody's sharing. And, you know, mommy's phone, they don't know how to wait without that piece of equipment. And so kids really don't have the skills to wait. Games like Duck, Duck, Goose, Red Light, Green Light, Simon Says, teaches some of those waiting skills that are super important and turn-taking skills that are important in play. And so I would encourage you out on the playground to help kids with those games, or even incorporate them into circle time activities.
Sandy.
Yeah.
Sandy, can I interrupt? We have a few questions from some of our attendees.
Okay. How do I look at questions?
I'm going to read them to you, so you don't even have to do anything.
Okay, great.
So we have 3. I'm going to go with one that goes, we just went over it. For 3, this is from Regina. For 3-year-olds, can children use 2 hands to manipulate the spray bottle, or should we encourage just 1 hand?
That is a great question. I would say we want to get them to the point where they're using 1 hand, because that would definitely be a more advanced skill. But if they can't do it with 1 hand and they're going to be successful, I'd like them to gain success and then build the skill. I'm a big proponent of success builds success. But if I'm constantly redirecting, not that way, do it this way, a child can get frustration. So I want them to be successful first, and then build it into a game. Oh, I see you can do it with 2 hands. Let's get the whole mirror with 2 hands. Oh, you made it all blue. Can you do it with just 1 hand? Try it just once. Okay. So I would let them start with 2 hands and then see if I can build in interactions where they get it with 1 hand. And then different spray bottles may have different ease. So I would look around for those spray bottles. Like Windex bottle might be different than like a spray bottle that you buy at the dollar store. And so, you know, save all those bottles, clean them out really good so that they're not going to hurt kids, but then give them those opportunities of different hand size. If they need to start with 2 hands, great, but then work towards 1 hand and build the skill. But again, I would say have the child be successful first, and have that success build other successes. Okay, next question.
Perfect. Next is from Shonda. When log rolling, how far away should the target be?
So great question again. So if you're log rolling, it can be 6 to 8 feet away. It doesn't have to be close at all, so that they have an opportunity to do 5 or 6 log rolls before, and maybe what they're doing is you're changing what the target is. So when I do this activity, I actually steal all our speech cards, which are pictures of objects. So maybe I have a whole bunch of pictures of animals, and the kids start at the beginning of the mat. And if you have a preschool, you have all the kids at the end of the mat. You have 12 kids going. The first kid gets to log roll down, and he's identifying giraffe, bear, and the next kid gets going, and he sees bear, octopus, and the next child gets going, and so you can keep it, and they go run around to the back of the line. So it can be pretty far away. It doesn't have to be real close. So you're talking 6 to 10 feet is a good amount of space.
Great. And we actually have a lot of questions coming in now.
Okay.
So we're going to go back to W sitting. This is Karen. She has a 4-year-old that sits in the W position all the time. He struggles to sit crisscross. They help him get into that position. She wants to know if it's okay to transition first to sit with legs straight out while he is learning to sit crisscross.
Absolutely. Like I said, I love children to have success first. So if they're always W sitting, what ends up happening is that they're used to being very internally rotated at their hips, and they may not actually be able to externally rotate the way they need to in order to W sit. And so having one leg in a long sit and one leg in a crisscross, so that you're starting to get that position might be easier for that child. If they need to start in long leg, just to have legs in a more neutral position, that's great too. Maybe doing things, I'm trying to think of some other things, like giving them a pillow behind them so that they are tilted a little bit more forward. So the back of their rear end is sitting on the pillow. Might be helpful to give them a little bit more hip positioning forward. The other thing that happens is it's not only their hips, but it could be their spine. Now they're so used to being in that rocked back position that they literally don't have the hip mobility to move their whole trunk forward. So yeah, you have to take those baby steps and see what you can do and what's successful first, and then build to that crisscross position if kids are unable to do it. So, you know, like I said, success builds success. So what can they do positively? Oh, I like the way you're sitting. One leg's in crisscross. Great. We're going to work on that right now. So that's an excellent way to start. Good questions.
And then we have someone who is wondering, they have a student with a behavior problem and they're wondering how to correct him.
Okay. So behavior problems come for a lot of reasons. So some kids have behavior because they're trying to avoid the task, and they use behaviors to get out of the task. And a lot of times behavior works really effectively. So if I melt down, guess what? I'm not doing that coloring task that you just wanted me to do. If I throw myself on the floor, now I don't have to do, you know, that the clothespin task that you just asked me to do. So sometimes kids are working to avoid the task. Sometimes kids have behavior because they're looking for attention. And so we really need, and then some kids are having behavior because they're overwhelmed from a sensory perspective. So when we're looking at behavior, we need to identify why is that behavior happening. And so if the task is too hard, how can I break down that task so that they can still be successful within that task? So maybe I need to come over and do hand over hand for coloring with them. Or maybe instead of writing their letters, they get to trace their letters. You know, whatever it is, I'm breaking down that skill for them so that they, so I can find that spot that they can be successful. If they're seeking attention, what I try to do is avoid the negative attention, and I give them as much positive as I can. So if they got up from the transition and started walking toward the table, great job, Billy. I am so glad that you're in the group and you're working to move toward the table. That's exactly what Miss Sandy wanted you to do. Good boy. Sits down at the table. Ah, Billy, I love the way you're sitting with your classmates. Thank you so much for sitting at the table. What a great job. So now I'm building the success from the things that I expected from that child, the things that I know that child can do. And I'm giving him that positive attention way up front so that I don't see that negative attention. So if we know that the child's seeking attention, we want to make sure that we're uploading with positive attention. Frequently, if I have a little guy that's an eloper and they pull out of my hand and they don't want to hold hands with me, the minute I hold their hand, I'll say, thank you for holding my hand. Oh, I love it when you hold my hand. You keep me so safe. And then usually, instead of pulling away from me, they relax into my hand. But if I say to them, nope, you got to hold my hand, can't run away, got to hold my hand, that actually is works less effective because now they're trying to pull away and they're, you know, getting attention for pulling away. But if they put their hand into mine and immediately I say, oh, I love to hold your hand, now they're getting the attention for the activity that I wanted to happen. So I think this is super hard skill to build yourself, because we're not, as adults who expect kids to be able to do things, we're not in that mode of complimenting everything that they do. And I don't mean that you should compliment everything that they do, but for some of our kids, they don't understand what the expectations are. They're not getting the social clues from their classmates that are all sitting down. They did not understand the social cues that you gave on your face that told them that you were upset with the behavior that they just did right now. They are not getting the social cues from your body about how to sit forward and how to have eye contact with them. And so for those kids, we need to give them that positive reinforcement so that they understand what the expectations are and what we want them to do. I don't know how many of you have participated in school-wide effective behavior. I have a lot of feelings about it. I think school-wide effective behavior can be really a positive thing, but we want to make sure that the kids who always do what they're supposed to also get positively praised. I know when my daughter was in first grade, they ended up doing school-wide effective behavior at her school. And she was a quiet kid who did everything the teacher said, followed directions, and came home crying from school because she did not earn as many tickets for doing what she was supposed to do as the little boy next to her who always called out and did all the wrong things. So yes, we want to positively reinforce those children who are doing the wrong things so that we can get them to move in the direction that we want, but we don't want to forget to positively reinforce that child who is always doing what they're supposed to and always following the directions, because that can be problematic as well in a whole different way. So, and Lauren, do we have any more questions?
We do. We're a little bit over time, Sandy. So we have just two more. There's two more questions. We'll have these be the last two, and then if you want to finish up and go over the Act 48 information for everyone.
Sure. Okay.
So this next one is I had a girl that didn't. This is from Lourdes. I had a girl that didn't like to sit up at all. She started to walk when she was 12 months. Skipping that will affect. Will that affect her physical development later in life?
Okay, so she didn't crawl and she only walked. Is that what it is?
She didn't like to sit up at all. She started to walk when she was 12 months. Will that affect her physical development?
Okay, so it could, or it may have no problem. So what you really want to look at is, does the child have all the components of movement that they need? So for example, I'll go back to my own kids again. My middle child, did not walk. 13 months, we're still not walking. And we're getting to that end of, normal development of when kids should be walking. So as a therapist, I was panicked and I took her to my PT friend and said, okay, what's wrong with my child? She's not walking yet. And my PT friend said, but look, she's crawling. She's using reciprocal movement when she crawls. She's rotating through sit. She's what we call using trunk rotation. She's crossing midline. She's doing all the things that she need to. And guess what? Like next week she was walking. She ended up being like my best athlete and the most coordinated. It was just her personality to wait until she had everything done. So I think when we look at, a child didn't crawl or doesn't like to sit, okay, what components are they missing components of movement that they need for other skills? That's the greater concern to me. And if they aren't missing those components, then they may not have needed to stay in that skill set as long as other children to build skills. So I think that's the important thing. Are they developing all their other skills on time? Are they crossing midline? Are they able to rotate their trunk to reach for something across for them? Those are the important things. Do they have the components of movement that they need down the road? Okay.
Great.
And one more, Lauren?
And this kind of, Sandy, leads into this next, the final portion of the presentation is, how does the teacher address red flags with parents?
I guess we didn't really get there, and I apologize. I was going a little bit too slow. So our concerns, start by taking notes. Documentation is definitely your friend. It's going to support your observations. When you talk to families, provide those examples. Recommend a professional evaluation that can be done at the county level, which is an educational evaluation. Generally, if it's done from 3 to 5, those options are generally free, and but the child in order to qualify, they need to have a larger delay, and so that can be problematic because they may not have a large enough delay in order to qualify. You can always call us for assistance. Giving the parent strategies on where to go and how to get help is often really important. And then the thing I always throw back to parents too is, do you see any of these concerns? I have trouble understanding your child. Does anybody else have trouble understanding your child? This is what I see. He's always hugging the other kids and knocking them down. Do you see that when he gets together with kids at your house? Like, try to provide examples that parents might also see, but document the concerns that you have so that, if the parent does decide that they're going to go for an evaluation, we have many parents who come in and say, I'm here because my preschool teacher told me to, but I have no idea why I'm here. But if they have some of those documentation, that helps us know what to look for and what to look at, and then we can help explain that to parents as well. And so that can be a great step. But documenting your concerns is going to be your very best friend. And then recognize that each family has various levels of acceptance and have different responses to feedback. Some people will hear it right away. Some people, you need to talk to them several times before they are able to understand that this is a problem. Some people need to process it, talk to their friends, talk to their in-laws, then get back to you. But approach them with clear, observable things that you've documented that will help them define the area of difficulty. Recognize that you may need to approach that family more than one time and try to problem solve on your own and document. So frequently, if you say, I've noticed your child has trouble with X, Y, and Z. I've tried this, and I've tried this, and I'm out of resources. Do you have any suggestions on how I should best approach your child? Now we're starting to have that dialogue that there is a problem. Maybe the parent has figured out the great way to handle their child, and you can start and then get back to them and say, yes, this helps in this situation, but we're still having problems in these situations, and I'm concerned that their transition to kindergarten is going to be problematic for them. So giving them those observable concerns is going to be really, really helpful, and be cautious of feeling like, if I could just take this child home, things would be so different. If this mommy only would do this, that really sets up a negative feeling between you and that parent, and every parent has the ability to do different things. Sometimes I hear therapists say, oh, if they would just do their home program, we would make so much more progress. Well, maybe they have football every night, and they work 50 hours a week, and they're struggling to get dinner on the table, and their child needs to go to bed at 8 o'clock. There isn't enough time in the day. And so we need to really see where parents are and get them where they're at, and then try to pull them in the direction that we want them to go. And talk to parents about, we're going to work on this together. It really does take a village to raise a child. And remember that it's better to be concerned and be wrong than to never mention your concern and be right. And so that's certainly important. The next couple of charts, just so you know, are just those milestones. I'll tie it up just so you should have them in your packet. And at the very end of the presentation, in order to get your Act 48 professional attendance, you need to fill out the form that is located under handouts. You'll see that there's the Act 48 professional development attendance form. Please fill that out. Make sure you have your PDE, professional identification number, and then return it to me at this email address by March 31st. And then I can get that into the PERMS program so that you get your Act 48 credit. Anything else to add, Lauren?
No, I think that's it, Lori.
All right.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to add one more thing, talking about if you have concerns and you want to address a parent. I just want to make sure that everyone on the call knows that we, as any of the TheraPlay family of companies, are willing, able, and excited to come in and provide free screenings at your preschools as well. So that sometimes will help when you're having that conversation with the parents. So just please get in touch with whoever is your local physician liaison, if you would like to schedule one of those, especially if you have several children that you're concerned about. This might be a really easy way to help facilitate that discussion. So just wanted to throw that out to you. And I just, in wrapping up, wanted to say thank you again to everyone that attended this education. Was a great number of participants. I want to say thank you to Sandy for providing this valuable, awesome information. Thank you to Lauren for making sure that this all worked for all of us and monitoring the calls. And I just want to say from all of us at the TheraPlay family of companies that we want to, let you know we're thinking about you. We are hoping everyone is staying safe and healthy through these times that we're traveling in right now. Our thoughts are with all of you. They're with all of our employees, all of our patients, and all of their families. And we want you to all take care of yourselves and your families. And we'll look forward to providing more of these types of education for you. So please make sure that when you're doing your responses, you let us know what other topics you'd like to hear more about. And I know that we can bring those to you. So everyone have a wonderful night.